Hello and welcome once again to Let's Start Cooking. I'm Wayne, and today we're gonna go and we're gonna try an Italian dish, and it's called carbonara. And it's really easy. There's only 4 ingredients to this whole recipe, and they're really simple ingredients. It's eggs, it's cheese, it's black pepper, and it's guanciale. Now I do have a disclaimer to make. In my area, it's almost impossible to get what they call cured pork guanciale, because it comes from the cheek of the pig, and a lot of people end up substituting either pancetta or they'll substitute and use bacon. I am using bacon this time only because I couldn't get the other stuff unless I ordered it, and I don't really like ordering meat on the internet. Now, if you do use bacon, try to get what I have here is just cured. This is not smoked bacon, and that's the big difference between both. Guanciale is not smoked, it's just cured, and it has a little bit more fat in it. So we're gonna use bacon today, and all we're gonna do is we're just gonna take it, and what we wanna do is we wanna cut this in strips. We're not gonna make really big strips, we're just gonna cut this in strips, because what we wanna do is we're gonna end up cooking this first. And we want to make sure, so what we're just gonna do is just cut this in little strips like this. You don't want to go really big. And we're just going to cut this up like this. Because don't forget now, when we end up cooking this, it's going to get a lot smaller. So we don't want to go too small. Now, some people like to cut this in cube sizes. You can cut it up at the size of a dice. But we're going to just do strips right now. And the way that we're doing this, for every 100 grams of pasta, and normally it's 100 grams per person, which averages out to about a little over 3 ounces. So for every 100 grams of pasta, 3 ounces, 4 ounces, you want 90 grams of guanciale, or you want pork. So it averages out to about 90 grams, which is right around about 4 ounces. So we want about 4 ounces of this. And what we do is we cut this in strips, like I said. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna end up putting this in a pan, and we're gonna end up cooking this. Now again, traditionally you use guanciale with this, but when you can't find it, we're not cooking for a restaurant, we're not cooking, this is for home. And the biggest thing when it comes to food is taste. So we want to make sure, and like I said, we're using a cured pork, we're not using smoked. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this to a cold pan, and we're going to let this render itself down. Now when you do this, we don't want to cook this so far that it's hard. We want a nice little crisp on the outside. And again, with guanciale, a lot of times it's going to be softer because there's more fat to it. So we'll let this render down. We're going to get this to where it's just getting golden brown. But we started with a nice cold pan. So now you see the color of it. This is about what we want because we don't want to get it any darker. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the pork from the pan, and we're going to save what we have in here, because we're going to end up using this. So we'll remove this, and then we'll remove the pan off the heat, and then we'll go to our next step. Once we have our pork rendered down, we're going to let that sit to the side for now, and we're heating up our water for our spaghetti. Now, when you heat up the water, especially for this, we are using pecorino cheese, which is a saltier cheese, so be careful how much salt you add to your water. We normally want water for pasta to be about the same as like ocean water. Well, this I use about half, because between the bacon or the pork, whatever you use, between the pecorino cheese, it's going to be a little salty. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So what we want to do now, while we're waiting for the water to heat up, we're going to take our cheese, and as you can see, I'm using just a block of pecorino. I strongly suggest don't buy this already shredded, because it's not only going to not bind, it's got some chemical added to it that stops it from binding up, but it's also going to make it really hard to incorporate with the eggs. So I suggest that you just buy a block of this, and all we're going to do is we're just going to grate this really fine. We're going to grate this really fine because we want this to incorporate with our eggs, and we want this to melt and make a nice cream sauce. Because in carbonara, just like in fettuccine, there is no cream that's added to this. This is all you see. And now that we have this all shredded up, and as you can see, we ended up with a lot, but you are going to use all this, and that's why we wanted it really fine. because we're gonna mix this, and we wanna make sure that we mix this up really well, and that way we can melt it in. But now that we're done with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna check on our water, and we'll see if our water is ready. Now that our water is boiling, we're just gonna take our pasta, and we just let it go. We're not gonna play with it. We're just gonna make sure that as it starts to soften up, we're gonna make sure we push it down, make sure we keep mixing it up till it comes back up to a boil. Now that we have our pasta on, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna take our eggs. Now, I'm using 4 eggs, but I'm gonna use 3 egg yolks and 1 whole egg. So we're just gonna separate these, because one thing we don't wanna do is we don't wanna crack this over the bowl that we're gonna use, just in case we don't want a shell. So we're just gonna separate them. And again, I'll have all the ingredients to this in the description, but normally it's an egg per person, just like it is when it comes to the pasta, how much you're using. You can use a shell like I'm doing, or you can even put this in your hand if you want to separate them. I'm just using the shell because I don't feel like getting egg yolk all over my hand, but you don't have to get it all. We just don't want to use the whole egg for 3 of them. So we're just going to separate them. And after we have that, and then we're going to use 1 whole egg. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to take our cheese, and we don't have to be careful. I mean, don't add it all at one shot, but what we're going to do is we're just going to add our egg and our cheese together. I'm going to mix this up, because what we want to do now is we're going to incorporate this right like that. And we want to get this all nice and mixed up. And our pasta, we're going to cook that for about 12 minutes. Always go by whatever your instructions on your package are, but I'm using a thick spaghetti, so I'm going to go for about 11 to 12 minutes. You could use bucatini if you can find it. Again, in my area, it's kind of hard to find the traditional ingredients. And we're just going to add all this cheese. Right on in. Because we want to get this all mixed up. Because what this is going to do, it looks thick now, but what this is going to do is this is going to create a nice cream sauce. So now that we got this a little bit thicker, we'll get our spatula and we'll continue mixing this up. And it looks rough now, but this cheese, since we shredded it very fine, this is all going to melt in when we add it. I'm going to make a nice cream sauce out of this. And now we have this mixed up, we'll check on our pasta, and when that's ready, we can go on to our next step. Now that the pasta is done, we're just going to leave it right in the pan that we have it so it stays nice and warm. And we're going to turn the heat back on our pan that had our bacon in it, because we want to bring this back to life. We want this to heat up a little bit. And what we're going to do before we start, we're going to take a little bit of this pasta water, because that's going to help us make a nice cream sauce. So you always want to save your pasta water. You don't have to save a lot, like I have right now, about a cup. So we're just going to save that, and we're going to let this heat up a little bit, because we want to get this nice and warm. And while we're waiting, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of that pasta water and we're going to add it to our cheese and our egg mixture. So we're just going to add just a little bit of this, and we're just going to add right to our, like I said, you see I'm not adding a whole lot, and we're just going to mix this up just a little bit. Because again, these are eggs, and we don't want to scramble the eggs. So now we have this just mixed a little bit. Like I said, we're not going nuts with it. We're not making a sauce yet. All we're going to do is we're going to take our pasta right out of our pan, and we're not going to worry about the water, and we're just going to put it right in our pan. Because what we want to do is we want this to soak up all that nice pork. Turn this down just a little bit. Now, when you're doing this, with our next step, you're going to be very careful because we don't want to, again, I know I keep saying it, but I see a lot of people do it. We don't want to scramble the eggs. So we're just going to get this to incorporate all together. And once we get to this point, we're going to remove this, and we're actually going to take our pot that we have our pasta water in, and we're going to use that to keep this pan warm when we add our cheese into this. What we're going to do is we're going to use the heat coming off this pot to keep our pan warm without having to worry about scrambling our eggs. And now that we have this, we're going to take our egg mixture and our cheese, and we're just going to put that right in. And we're not going to go nuts right away because we want to make sure it just mixes up pretty well. And this is where your pasta water comes in handy too, because if you find out that you don't have enough, you can always put some water in this, because like I said, we're going to make a cream sauce out of this, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but you're going to notice this is going to start to break up, and this is going to start to melt for us, and you're going to see a nice cream sauce develop. But we want to make sure we do this a little at a time, because we don't want to just make one big ball in the center that we can't break up right away. And see how you see it's a little dry on us? So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of our water. And as you can see, we don't use cream. We don't use butter. We just use our cheese. Now as you can see, it does take a little bit of time, but you can see how nice and creamy this is getting. We're melting all that cheese in there. Now, what we want to do while we're doing this, and we're making sure we mix it all up, and like I said, make sure you mix this up well, because if you don't get it all over, you're going to get spots that are going to stick together, and we don't want that. We want a nice, creamy sauce like we have now. And now that we have this, we want to add half of our bacon. We're going to save the other half for when we garnish. And carbonara would not be carbonara with a lot of pepper. And we want a lot of pepper. And we're just going to mix this up. And as you can see, it wasn't a hard dish. Don't be intimidated by, you know, some dishes that you might not have ever tried before. This is a very simple dish. Anybody can do it without making a mess and splashing all over yourself. But anybody can do this. And all we have to do now is we just have to plate. So we'll get this pan off the heat. And this is one of the dishes where you're going to want to serve this hot. You don't want this to cool down, because as it cools down, it's going to get really thick. So we'll get this plated up. And we just put a little bit on the plate. And we just put a little bit of bacon on for garnish. And like I said, I would use guanciale if I could find it. Unfortunately, I can't get it in my area unless I order it. And I really don't like ordering off the internet when it comes to meat products. But that is how you make carbonara. And if we top it off, we can even add a little bit more pepper. Now some people like to put even more cheese on top of it. I'm just going to leave it like that. And as you see, it was 4 ingredients. It's not that hard, doesn't take that long. It's a real creamy. Pepper gives it just a little bit of spice to it, but not a lot. It's the cheese comes out right away. This pasta's cooked perfect. And like I said, you can make this in as long as it takes you to boil water. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like and share and hit that notification button, and I will see you next week.